This is a production of WTVI PBS Charlotte.
The following episode of Charlotte Cooks is brought to you by Central Piedmont Community College and viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi there. Welcome to this edition of Charlotte Cooks. I'm Chef Pamela Roberts, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. What we're going to be making on this episode is one of those, they seem to be really popular nowadays, the fruit and nut energy bars, protein bars, snack bars, whatever you want to call them. They're relatively expensive in the store when you buy them one by one, but today we're going to make some at home. You can get about 20 bars out of one of these recipes, and that, really goes a long way as far as these little snack bars go. What we're going to be using, I'm going to show you some techniques on how to cook some sugar. I'm going to show you some techniques about how to roast nuts and how to put it all together to make these delicious bars. You are not going to believe how beautiful these things turn out and how yummy and delicious they really are. So let's look at our ingredients. What we're going to be using is a lot of different kinds of fruit. Now, it really just depends on what you like and what you prefer. So some of the options are dried cherries, dried cranberries, dried apricots. Now, if you're going to use whole fruits like this, I would highly suggest cutting them up first. You can use dried blueberries. Look how tiny those are. These are absolutely perfect for this. You can use toasted coconut flakes, and if you can't find the big flakes, you certainly can use the small flakes as well. And you can put chocolate in here. You can put, like, one of my favorite ones is the chocolate and sea salt. Other things that we're going to use in our bars here, we've got all this dried fruit, whatever other kind of dried fruit you want to use. You can use mango, you can use dried banana, but just make sure if you're using the larger chunks, you chop them up smaller, and you'll see why in just a moment. Now we can also use, let me talk about some of the nuts we can use. You can use like a candied pecan. If you candy pecans, you can certainly use candied pecans. You can use toasted flat almonds, sliced almonds. You can use cashews. Cashews are marvelous. You can use pecans. You can use slivered almonds. What else can we use? We've got a lot of things over here. We can use pistachios. They're really yummy. Now let me tell you a thing about pistachios. Once you roast them, you want to give them a little rub and see if the skin comes off. Because when the skin comes off, what happens after you rub them a little bit, you're left with these bright green pieces. You don't have to worry about it so much for this bar, but I would always suggest after you roast the nuts a little bit, just give them a little rub with your towel so that you can get as much of that dark skin off as possible and all that little bright green can show up, okay? What else we're going to use? Here we got some toasted pumpkin seeds here. These are awesome. Now, come holiday time when you're doing your pumpkins, folks, I would save those seeds and toast them up. I could eat this bowl of pumpkin seeds. They're so good for you, but they're a lovely thing to add to these little fruit and nut bars. First, I'm going to show you how we're going to toast some almonds, okay? This is good for doing the slivered almonds or for doing the sliced almonds, either way. We're going to turn the pan on. We're just this dry pan. You don't use any oil in this, which is really what makes it kind of nice. You want to get it to be kind of hot, so you wouldn't touch it. Remember, that's how you tell a pan is hot. But while we're waiting for that to get warm, I'm going to show you, we're going to do another way of roasting nuts. Putting them in a saute pan like that is not necessarily the best way of doing it. So I'm going to take a piece of parchment paper, and this is a really great way of how you cut your parchment paper, folks. Let me get some of these nuts out of the way here. We're going to take a knife, we're going to fold your paper in half, and then on your cut side, just cut it right in half like that. And that's really nice because then you don't waste any of your parchment paper. And look at that, it fits perfectly onto a sheet pan, okay? So in order to roast these large nuts, you're just going to take them and put them on a sheet pan, spread them out so that they're not crowded on the pan, and just put them in the oven, 350 degrees, for maybe, about 10 minutes. You want to keep watching them just to make sure that they're not going to burn on you. But 350 degrees is going to take them about maybe 10 or 15 minutes, maybe up to 20, depending if your cashews are cold by being in the refrigerator. Now my pan is hot. I'm going to put these smaller nuts into a saute pan, and I'm going to let them sit there for a second. Now the thing is, you got to keep moving them, because if you don't move them, the ones in the bottom will get toasted before the ones on top get toasted. So just move them around a little bit. Okay? Shake them up. Now, while that's toasting, we're going to get our nuts all toasty up. I really want you to toast the nuts first, because putting the raw nuts into these, it's not necessarily very, it doesn't give you a good mouthfeel, because it's more mushy than it is crunchy. And toasting also brings out the beautiful flavor of the nuts themselves. So while these are toasting, I'm going to go ahead and grab some of my other nuts that I already have done, and I'm going to start measuring out my ingredients that I need for my protein bar. Actually, I'm just going to watch these for a minute, because these will go burning pretty quickly. What I'm going to use over here, I've got some slivered nuts already done. So our first recipe that we're going to be making is the mixture. This is a very basic mixture. It calls for about 3½ cups of nuts. And so I'm going to measure out a variety of nuts. Now you can use all almonds. This is going to be a little sloppy here. Does it have to be an exact measure? Not exactly. All right. I'm hearing something over here. When you hear these nuts, they're going to start going beep, beep, beep. That's the time when you need to come over and give them a little shake. Because when they start making little popping sounds, it means they're getting really close to being toasted. See how they're already getting toasted there? Now, one of the things you have to be prepared to do as soon as they are done toasting is get them out of that pan, because if you don't, they're just going to continue to sit in this hot pan and continue to cook. Okay? So you want to get that out of there. And I'm going to say those are done. Okay, we don't want them all golden brown. We just want them to where you can smell the aroma of the roasted nuts. And you also want to see some golden brown. So let's go ahead and get that in there. There we go. And put this pan aside and let these nuts cool down. Okay? Now, I've got 1 cup in here. I need about 3½ cups total. Where'd my measuring cup go? So I'm going to use some slivered almonds in addition to my sliced almonds. I'm going to throw some pumpkin seeds in here, because I think pumpkin seeds are an amazing flavor. And like I said, I could eat this whole bowl. You know, the thing is about having bowls of nuts around, what do people do when they walk by? Munch, crunch. And that's okay, because nuts are really healthy for you. All right, I'm going to need another kind of nut, so I think I'm going to choose pistachio, because pistachios will also add a lovely color. And I just need another ½ cup of a nut, so I think I'm going to add a little bit of pecan. There we go. There we go. So now we've got all these lovely, lovely nuts all mixed up in here. Next, I'm going to choose some of my cereal grains. Now, I'm going to choose a crispy rice cereal. Now, you can choose a puffed millet, you can choose a puffed spelt, but crispy rice is always a nice one. It's not too big of a cereal grain and it's not too small. This just helps give your nuts some filler, and it also adds a nice little grain factor, okay? So now we're going to do, what flavors should we do? I might do, let's do some cherries. Let's put some cherries in here. And these are dried tart cherries. That looks good. That's about ½ cup of those. And I think I'm going to add some coconut flakes, just because I like the texture. Look at these flakes. I think they're very pretty. Some coconut flakes, and I'm going to add some dark chocolate chips. Yum. Why? Because I like chocolate. Okay? There you go. Now, here's another thing that we're going to add. We're going to add a little bit, like a tablespoon, of what's called ground flaxseed meal. And this just adds a nice protein. It gives you some other nutritional elements, but it also helps hold everything together. It acts kind of like a binder. But what's really going to be our binder is our sugar, okay? And our sugar that we're going to be using is going to be a non-high fructose corn syrup. It doesn't have high fructose corn syrup in it, but it is a corn syrup. It gets confusing. But you want to look for that. So you want to mix this all up. See how this is a nice mixture here? You want to get that all mixed up. Okay, so it's a good mixture. Just put that aside and let that be. The next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be preparing the mixture of our sugar. I've got some corn syrup here, and one thing you want to look for is no high fructose corn syrup. So find something that is a corn syrup without high fructose in it, okay? So I'm going to take ½ cup of this. Now, some recipes you may find for doing this may call for brown rice syrup, and I'll talk about that in a second while I'm measuring this out. But here's a trick about measuring out syrups, like corn syrup and honey and sticky things like that. if you spray your measuring cup first, and if you don't spray it, you can put, you can use olive oil or vegetable oil. Let's see, I need a third of a cup of honey. So you spray it, and I'm going to put it in this pan here. And you just pour it in there. Honey's such a pretty color. And I love the way honey comes in so many different colors depending on what it's made out of. Have you ever had lavender honey? Oh my gosh, that is amazing. And see, when you do that, the liquids come out much, much quicker and much easier than if you just put it in a dry measuring cup. Okay? So we've got a half a cup there. It's almost out. Okay, there we go. And the next one we're going to use is a half a cup measure. I'm going to go ahead and spray it as well. Okay, there we go. Half a cup of this. And you're going to mix these together. Now, you can use all honey, and you can use what we call a brown rice syrup. You certainly can do that. And one of the reasons I choose a corn syrup for this instead of the brown rice syrup is because the brown rice syrup doesn't really crystallize. The honey doesn't really, well, it sort of crystallizes, but like, you know, real sugar crystallizes. If you cook it all the way to a hard crack stage, it gets that really hard, crispy, you know what I'm talking about as far as sugar goes? We've all had hard candies. Honey and brown rice syrup don't seem to get to that stage. And so your bars would end up being a little bit chewy and maybe even really sticky, okay? And if you choose to do those things and you find your bars are a little on the sticky side, just put them in the refrigerator, and that'll keep them from being a whole lot sticky. And it'll just be a little bit easier for you to handle. But certainly if you add a little bit of the corn syrup to your mixture, it's not going to be as sticky as it would if you use brown rice syrup and honey. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this burner on high. Now, here's the secret here, folks. Sugar, when you get it to be a boil, you don't want to really stir it. You want to get it to a boil. When you put these things, you notice in the bottom of this pot, it's not a whole lot of liquid, okay? It's not a whole lot. It doesn't come up very high. When you choose a pot to do this, don't choose a little bitty short pot. Choose a pot that has a good amount of side on it, because when this stuff starts boiling, it's going to rise up. And I made the mistake of doing this one time in a little bitty short pot, saying, oh, that's not much sugar. So I put it in there, brought it to a boil. Next thing I know, it's boiling all over the stove. And what a mess to clean up. All right, so when this starts to get warm, it's going to loosen up quite a bit. You want to swirl it around. You don't want to put a whisk in here. You can put a spatula in here and stir it if you like. But the whole objective here is to get this mixture up to 260 degrees. Now, I've got a candy thermometer here, and I'm going to use a candy thermometer. But when I put this candy thermometer in that pot, it doesn't even come up to here to register on the thermometer. So I'm going to let this go a little bit, and when it comes bubbling up, I'm going to lean this over to the side, and I'm going to put the candy thermometer in. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. So don't think that it's really problematic, because there's always a way around everything in the kitchen. Okay, you just have to be a little creative. Okay, so now it's getting ready to come to a boil. This will only take between 4 and 7 minutes for it to get to the temperature you want it to be. So when you're doing this, make sure you've got your mixture ready to go and your pan ready to go. So now we've got a couple of minutes to go before this is ready, and there it goes. It's getting to a big boil. Now I hope you can see this, because now we're not going to move it around. We're just going to swirl it just one more time. We're going to let that boil. See how that's just whoosh. It's coming way up. See that? And that's what you don't want to have come up all over your stove, okay? Now, you can take your candy thermometer and you could put it in there, but I'm just going to hold it for a minute because I need to get the pan ready. So what I'm going to do for my pan, I'm going to take a 9 by 13 pan. If you have a glass dish, you can use a glass dish or whatever. I find these lovely little sheet pans to be perfect. I'm going to take a piece of parchment paper. Now, you may find some recipes online for this that tell you just to push it into the pan, a greased pan, but I find having this parchment paper is really, really, really beneficial. I'm going to give this a good spray. And so now, when I have my mixture all finished, I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it into this pan, okay? And we're going to see how that works. Now, let me see what the temperature of this is. turn that down just a little bit. There we go. Now, this is how I'm going to test the temperature in this. See how I'm tilting it off to one side? And I'm putting the thermometer in so that that red part, it's actually down into the boiling sugar. And I'm going to watch that thermometer rise. See where it is. And you can see the hardball stage right up here on the thermometer. Now, I have to tell y'all, be very careful with hot sugar, because hot sugar is super hot, and there is a nasty, nasty, nasty burn that happens with hot sugar, okay? So if you get hot sugar on your skin, plunge it into ice water or cold water before you try. If you try to pull that sugar off your skin, it's going to be nasty. So just put it in a sink of water and get it dissolved that way. All right, it's reached temperature. Now remember, you want to make sure that you don't drip this sugar all over you anywhere. So now, I'm going to take this, turn the heat off, put it over here. I'm going to pour it into my bowl and work quickly. Ooh, you can smell that, honey. Lovely. Okay, work quickly to stir this all up. Stir it up. Get it all coated. Now, and once again, you're going to find some recipes that say to do this with your hands. Folks, don't do this with your hands. You got how hot is sugar in here? No, let's not do that with your hands. One thing you're going to notice too is your chocolate chips are going to melt. And that's what makes it all, look at this, it's all going all together now. See that? And it's getting a little on the firm side. You can see how it's starting to stick together and that sugar's starting to cool down. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to put it in my pan. And the big thing here now is to spread it all out. Okay? This is kind of like me trying to be a ballerina. There's no way of being graceful about it. Okay? Spread it out into your pan. Now, here's a little trick too. If it gets to be a little too, if you don't get the stuff spread out fast enough, you can always put it into an oven to heat it up again to keep working with it. And while I was saying that, did you notice what I just did? I took a nice flat bottom heavy duty glass, sprayed it so it wouldn't stick, and I'm using that to spread this stuff out, okay? You want it to spread out into a nice solid mass. Get all your corners done. Get it all evenly pressed out. Okay. You want it to be nice and even so that you can get a good 20 bars out of here. Now you might want to make them a little bit bigger, but you know, think about the calorie count, okay? You do want to have a nice amount to eat, but you don't want to be gaining weight from your snacks. Just get a nice little energy going. See how I'm doing this? Make sure your glass is good and sturdy. Don't use some delicate crystal for doing this because it'll just shatter in your hands. Okay? So now I've got that all laid out in there. I'm still trying to flatten it out just because I can. You want it to get as flat as you possibly can. So next I'm going to take another piece of paper and spray it. I'm always spraying the papers for this because I don't want the sugar to stick to the paper. I want these things to come out, okay? So now, to fold the paper over and take another pan and press it on top. So you get it all nice and even, okay? We're going to let this cool for a few minutes. You can tell by feeling the bottom of your pan how cool it is. Now this is still quite warm, but we want to let it to cool just maybe about 20 minutes or so. By letting it cool, what's going to happen is it's going to set up just a little bit, and then we're going to turn it out on our board and we're going to cut it up, okay? So while this is cooling, I'm going to clean up and I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so my bars are about ready to come out. When I'm done with my bars, with the ones I'm not going to eat, I'm going to want to wrap up in some parchment paper. So I'm going to show you once again how we're going to cut that parchment paper up. because we want to be able to make sure that the bars are going to stay nice and neat. And you really do have to keep them separated. You can't just stack them up in a cookie jar or something like that. You'll end up with a real mess. Okay, so you want to wrap them up. And that makes them easy to grab and go. Take your knife, cut it in half. Fold your paper in half again. Make a good seal on the edge, a good seam. Take your knife and cut it in half again, and then do it again, okay? Just like this. And this is all you need to get enough paper to wrap up the bars, okay? And one more time, okay? Then we've got all these nice little papers we'll use to wrap them up, all right? So let's turn them out and let's see how they turned out. Now, don't be dismayed when you come and you do this. If you have a lot of loose nuts that float all over the place and don't necessarily stick together. If that happens, those become kitchen scoop snacks. Now, if some of these things fall out and they don't necessarily stick together, that's okay. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to cut it. Get your paper out of here. There you go. So the best way to cut this is to cut it straight down the center. Okay. And it's always best to cut them while they're still slightly warm. If they get too hard and too brittle and they're not cutting easily for you, just pop it in the oven just for a minute or two, because you don't want it to get all loosey-goosey on you again. You just want to soften it up a little bit. Now, 2 fingers wide. That's about 1 inch. Cut it straight down. There you go. And you see, sometimes on the end pieces, you may get some pieces that come up separate and apart, and that's okay. Like I said, they become scoop snacks for the kitchen people. And you just keep on going all the way down. You should be able to get 10 portions out of each side. Now, when you get them done, you're going to pick them up. And if you get little pieces coming out, that's okay. You get these beautiful little bars. Aren't they pretty? They're really nice. And you could take them over here, and when you wrap them up, let me show you how to wrap them up first. It's not a big deal how to wrap them up. You just wrap them. Take a piece of your parchment and just put the little bar in there and wrap it up. And put them in a airtight container, like here, okay? Lay them up in an airtight container so that you might want to write on the outside of them, you know, chocolate, nut, fruit, whatever. But keep them in an airtight container so that you can have them and they don't go really soggy on you, okay? But otherwise, what we're going to do, we're going to lay them out. We have our guests coming, and here you go. We have all these lovely bars made. These are made with apricot and pumpkin. This is almond, pumpkin, and cranberry. And here we have chocolate and all kinds of different nuts. And the ingredients are spread out on the tray. But aren't they fun? Aren't they lovely? You could certainly get some of these onto your platters for your guests, for yourself, for your family. I think they're marvelous. I think they're beautiful. And I think they're delicious. I hope you get to try them. I hope you're not intimidated by this, because it really is very nice and very fun to do. Wait till you taste them. They're delicious. I didn't mention about putting any kind of extract flavoring in them. You can put vanilla in them if you want. You can do other things too, like I was telling you about the salt. You can sprinkle the salt over the top so you can see it. Sprinkle that over the top there, and you've got another little bar there that I'm going to cut this one. Put this one on the tray. There we go. Clean up the edges. There we go. How about that? There's another one for you. Yummy, delicious. I hope you try it. You can find our recipes on our website, pbscharlotte.org, and I'm Chef Pamela Roberts. So please, if you'd like to drop me an email, my email is Pamela, P-A-M-E-L-A, .Roberts, R-O-B-E-R-T-S, @cpcc.edu. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching this episode of Charlotte Cooks, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye now.
production of WTVI PBS, Charlotte.